All right, today we got a story from r/nosleep. It's called I Found a Disturbing House on Google Maps. It's by the Theeaglestrikes. And that title alone reminds me of a part of forbidden Google Maps where you could enter in these coordinates and you would see this cursed totem figure on someone's patio. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. But
Totem figure.
yeah, it was pretty interesting. But
I thought you were gonna mention like the black squares that no one knows what's inside.
there was the black squares. And then I saw one more recently where someone goes into some weird recessed pit with a bunch of chairs in the bottom of it on some island in Australia.
Oh my god, I saw the exact same thing. I know what you're talking about. That's crazy.
It turned out to be. It did turn out to be fake, unfortunately, but funny nonetheless. I enjoy myself. I won't tell you where to look unless you want something terrifying to look back at you. When I first spotted the house in 2012, however, it wasn't disturbing. It was curious, like me. I don't remember why I was absent-mindedly scrolling across that British village, sparsely populated and near nondescript. What I do remember is the reason I stopped on a particular garden behind a detached house, which stood adjacent to vast acres of farmland. A long T-shaped shadow was painting the lawn. It looked, to my eyes, like an oversized scarecrow. For the sake of visibility, most satellite images are snapped when the sun is at its highest, meaning shadows are at their shortest. You'll rarely see people walking out and about, and even if you do, their shades won't give them away. It could have been a person standing with arms outstretched. Then again, something about my scarecrow hypothesis didn't sit well either. In any case, I was a teenager at the time, and my interests were fickle. I forgot about the whole thing for years, but in 2016, my friend and I were talking about the many unanswered internet mysteries floating around, and I recalled that very personal mystery of my own from 4 years earlier. I showed my friend the house on Google Maps, and it was even curiouser than the first time. There were two T-shaped shades. The original was long as ever, and the new one was half the height of the first.
Very odd shadows,
Oliver admitted.
And it's just a residential house, not part of the nearby farmland. So why would the homeowner need scarecrows?
I don't remember how I responded. The conversation took a detour into something else, thanks to the liquor incapacitating my thought processes. It wasn't until 2019 that my friend brought up the intriguing house again, so we Googled it once more. And again, the garden had changed. The second shadow had grown to the height of the first shadow. Something about the oddness of it all left me, for the first time in 7 years, quite afraid. I saw in his wide eyes that Oliver felt the same. He quickly played off his discomfort, but I noted his momentary lapse of cool-headedness, noted the hesitation which had preceded his stilted, unnatural laugh. I just didn't quite understand why we were both so afraid of two shadows.
The baby scarecrow is all grown up, eh?
He said. I didn't respond. 30 seconds later, Oliver held up his phone, displaying Google Maps, and said,
52 minutes.
I clocked the blue line dotting a route from his apartment to the countryside house, nearly an hour away, and I raised an eyebrow.
You're not serious. No way. I am.
He insisted.
We've been talking about this house for years. Don't you want to know what's in that back garden?
I shook my head.
Not anymore, dude. There's something off about that image, Oliver.
He groaned.
Oh, come on, Jamie. I know it's left an unscratched itch in your brain. I know you. We're not going to drive across the country to spy on someone's garden,
I said.
Well, I am, and I love your company.
Oliver replied, shrugging.
There's only so much a bird's eye view reveals, and the street view won't let us peek over those obnoxiously tall hedges. We need to see that place in person.
I feel as though I may have stepped out of my body for an hour or so. Let someone else take the reins. For I only realized that I'd been coaxed into accompanying my friend as his car rolled to a stop outside that famous house from Google Maps. No longer seen as a flat roof and garden from a bird's eye view, but as a three-dimensional, horribly real structure. The unassuming, red-bricked residential was surrounded by 8 feet tall hedges, countryside, and silence. There had been other cottages dotted along the winding country lanes here and there, but they did nothing to cut through the area's oppressive, all-consuming silence. Something about seeing the property in the flesh left my hairs tingling, left me ready to wrangle the steering wheel out of Oliver's grip and take us far away from that tall-walled place. And its hedges prompted an obvious question from my lips.
Unless you've brought stilts, how are we going to peek into this garden?
Oliver smiled as he opened the driver's door, so I followed him to the boot of the car. He'd always been more of a show-to-tell bloke. Inside the car's boot was a drone. Please, no, I inwardly groaned. I hated the thought of snooping on a stranger's property with an airborne camera. Then again, scaling the fence and trespassing would have been worse, so I nodded my head, signaling that I'd go along with Oliver's harebrained plan. He quickly took the drone up into the sky, and we watched the live feed on his tablet controller as the white, bladed, plastic insect sailed loudly above the house, rotors blurring against the sky. Oliver took the device over the roof tiles, and we both held our breath as the garden came into view. Then we exhaled in harsh, painful gasps of shock at the revealed casters of the long shadows I had seen in photos for 7 years. Not scarecrows at all. 2 humans were tied with thick, well-knotted rope around their wrists and legs to large wooden crosses, perhaps. As much as the thought horrified me, crucifixes. My friend and I did not scream, but instead fell very silent, very still. There's no trauma quite like shock. No horror quite like being frozen to the spot, unable to think, unable to run. And the terror of what we were seeing would only worsen as my friend decided with unsteady fingers to fly the drone downwards, taking it closer to the 2 bound people in the garden. One was an adolescent boy, wriggling weakly in restraints as his eyes fixed on the drone filming him from above. He wore a white tee with 5 letters torn through its fabric, torn through to the flesh, creating blood-stained letters on his torso. Spawn.
Oh, God.
I moaned in terror, slumping against the car with teary eyes on Oliver's tablet screen.
Dude, we have to call someone.
On the original cross, which I'd seen 9 years earlier, was a woman who barely looked like a woman at all. Her arms and legs poking out of holes and dungarees were nothing more than bundles of straw. Oliver and I finally broke free of our frozen states, beginning to retch as we realized that the captive woman was very much alive, but very much limbless, save for upper arms around which ropes were tightly wrapped. Cut through both her clothing and the skin beneath in much the same way as a squirming boy beside her was another blood-written word. Whore. Oliver opened his lips, managing only to hiss out a whispery, wordless puff before he managed to try again. Thunder cracked the air, followed by the live feed cutting out and the sight of the drone plummeting past the far side of the house, landing in the garden. That thunderous sound was one only heard in the true boonies of England. A gunshot. And moments later, my eyes caught the silhouette of a broad, bulky man behind the paper-thin curtains of the house's upstairs window. The drapes parted, then out peeked a double-barreled instrument and a hand reaching for the window's latch. I screamed in fear at Oliver.
Move.
As clambered into the car, the sounds of plastic squeaked, filling my ears. I didn't have to look up to know what would be pointing at us from that open window. Oliver floored the accelerator, and I half expected his side window to suddenly shatter, except for my best friend's body to collapse in a pool of blood against the steering wheel. However, there came no gunfire. We drove away.
What the fuck?
Oliver bellowed minutes later, spittle and tears and snot flying from his horrified face. I managed only to sob in response. My friend pulled into a petrol station 20 minutes later, and whilst I said that we needed to phone the police, he claimed that we should go back to the house first, that we should be brave. Oliver was worried that the
First of all,
homeowner had...
the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Why?
I know that makes absolutely no sense.
You would have prove yourself to the gunslinger. Like what?
I'm pretty sure those officers have nothing better to do in that rural English town, so they would disperse pretty quickly. That would be such an incredible event to witness for their department that they would all be there in moments. Oliver was worried that the homeowner had chosen not to follow us because he needed to dispose of all evidence. Then my friend suggested that we had a limited window in which to go back and record some evidence of what the man had done.
Dude, you watch way too many crime programs.
I pleaded, panting heavily.
This is the real world, Ollie. In the real world, you see a crime, then you call the police. That's how it works.
Anyhow, after much back and forth, my friend managed to dupe me into thinking that he was on board with my plan of simply leaving it to the authorities. But whilst I went into the petrol station to pay for our freshly filled tank, Oliver tore away and left me behind.
Stupid dumbass.
I tried to call him numerous times over the following hour or so. Nothing. Yeah, that usually works out well. So I rang the police and told them what happened. Then proceeded to rat on his friend. To give credit where it's due, the authorities took my claim seriously and searched the homeowner's property. However, as Oliver had feared, the responding officers found nothing in the stranger's garden. No crucified straw-stuffed victims, no carcass of a drone, no shotgun shell, nothing to validate my tall tale. The homeowner, a man named Mr. Tomlinson, told the police that he had seen neither a drone nor two men outside his property. I showed the police the satellite image on Google Maps, and Mr. Tomlinson simply laughed. He said that the image was at least a year out of date, that he'd gotten rid of those statues months earlier. Yes, statues. Apparently, this was a sufficient explanation for the police officers. Obviously, there were plenty of ways.
Your casual statues in the backyard. Who didn't have one, right?
My crucifix statues that are, for some reason, behind the hedges in my rural England home. There were plenty of ways to corroborate my story. The police checked the surveillance footage at the petrol station, saw Oliver and I standing by the pumps, then saw him drive away whilst I was in the shop.
See?
I protested.
We weren't saying you were lying, Jamie.
One police officer insisted.
We simply need evidence.
I pointed at the screen.
There's your evidence. We drove out here together. Now he's gone. Look, this was only a few hours ago. The two of you were clearly arguing. It looks like your friend just needs to cool off.
One of the officers suggested. They promised to look into Oliver's disappearance once the appropriate amount of time had passed. Well, 48 hours later, when he still hadn't shown face, the police took me more seriously. However, days, then weeks, then months went by.
Damn.
No sign of him. Yeah, he's gone. And the authorities failed to find any evidence suggesting that Mr. Tomlinson had been keeping people captive in his garden. No evidence of prisoners anywhere on his property. Then came the pandemic, and the world had bigger problems. Nobody believed my story. No matter how many times I talked about the Google Maps image and the drone and what the two of us had seen. Eventually, I researched the area surrounding Mr. Tomlinson's house, an area including surrounding hamlets and farms, all forming a tightly knit community. From news articles, I learned that a woman and a farmer went missing in 2011, and that got me thinking. So I managed to infiltrate a Facebook group for the local area, pretending that I bought a property in the area. They let me join. You wouldn't believe the things to be learned from a private Facebook group. That's where the village gossip lives in the 2020s. I learned that this local farmer had been a widow for 3 years before finally meeting someone new in 2010. Someone from the next county over. She goes to a different county. Plenty of folk didn't like this, as they'd adored his wife. And to make it worse, as one Facebook user commented, this new woman was an out-of-towner. I shared this information with the investigating police officers. They were aware of the missing persons cases. Obviously, but that was about all I could get out of them. They stonewalled me, much as they had with Oliver. And that left me with a gnawing feeling in my gut. Something that given that they lived in the area, I started to fear that they might be part of this tightly knit community too. Started to fear that they weren't too much fussed about digging too deeply into the area's disappearances. started to fear that they might even be culpable. Of course, many things didn't add up. Oliver and I had seen a woman and a boy in that garden, not a woman and a man. Still, there had to be something to this coincidence. I was certain of it. For a little while, I even considered breaking lockdown rules and returning to Mr. Tomlinson's property, doing my own investigation. But then came, in 2020, a series of haunting notes through my letterbox. I watched too. Nobody will ever, ever, ever find them. Don't come back. You'll come forth. I became an agoraphobe, became too terrified to go looking for Oliver. I would have broken lockdown rules for my old friend in a heartbeat, but the possibility of meeting Mr. Tomlinson again, the haunting man who nearly killed us from his window, was a nightmare too great to bear. Call me a coward if you must, but ask yourself what you would do in such a situation. Every day, I checked my windows expecting to see that stranger watching me from the driveway or the back garden. I have no idea how he found out where I lived. In early 2023, just as my phobia of the outdoors showed signs of somewhat abating, I thought about a particular word in that third and final note. Forth. I previously thought it to be a misspelling. I assumed Mr. Tomlinson had intended to write, "You'll come forth." But a new possibility popped in my head. When I returned to Google Maps once again, the last vestige of hope abandoned my body, and dread took its place. In the latest satellite image of Mr. Tomlinson's house, 3 T-shaped shadows painted the grass. I know who the third must be, but I'm still, 2 years later, too frightened to return and see for myself. Too frightened that I'll become the 4th shadow in the garden. More straw than man. I love that it concludes like that without him doing anything or saving his friend, but he definitely died. I'm wondering if there was some weird malformed fundamental religious reason for him doing this, because he had something to say about the woman and the son. It was this whore and spawn. So
yeah,
that must have been her son.
I was expecting like a supernatural element, but really it just seems like a deranged guy just snapped and just started killing people.
Maybe the woman was his wife or ex-wife and cheated on him and had a child, and he found out he wasn't his, so he turned them into scarecrows and killed them. It's possibly that. This story reminded me of a book I read recently. It was called The Everman, I believe, and it was very meta contextual. It was about a writer who writes horror novels, and what he writes in his horror novels starts happening as real life murders. So then the police are suspicious of him, and he's writing about a book that hadn't even come out yet. So there was some sort of like transitive effect of what he was writing in his books, and they were somehow being telepathically communicated to these visceral serial killers that were killing people in just grotesque ways. And one of them was killing someone and stuffing them like a straw, and they weren't even dead either, so, like intending to kill someone, but instead they're just maimed and they're just sitting there stuffed with straw, gagging for a period of time. So that's what the imagery of this story reminded me of that. But Oliver was asking for it. I mean, especially
Oliver is one of the dumbest people I've ever seen in a story. Like, what did he expect to happen, dude? Like, you
I have no idea.
Psycho who's just shot at you guys. Oh, I'm gonna go back and do what?
I'm not a big advocate for drone usage. I think in this instance, it was a fun use for one. But you think they would record if they were doing that? You know, if you're gonna get the drone over there, it's got a camera on it. Can't you just record? I'm pretty sure you could do that in 2020. So that also would have helped bolster their case. Instead, their evidence was, you saw us fight with each other, right? I bet you the cop would just say, yeah, sorry, mate. I don't believe you.
Also, extremely typical British police reply. It's like, yeah, I'm not doing anything about this at all. Oh, your friend got killed? Yeah, too bad.
Have you seen there's a pandemic right now? That's what they did go after. But I do like the story. I do like the thought. I was maybe starting to think about the Scarlet Letter or something, or maybe there was just some more like punishment and he was branding them with that. But you know what? Now this story's said and done, I'm unsure of who the protagonist is subjectively in my mind. I kind of respect Mr. Tom. I think it's Mr. Tomlinson was his name, or the guy on his lawn. A drone rolls up, trying to invade his privacy. He shoots it down. He's like, I'm working here. All right, I got something going on. I got a life, and you're trespassing.
Mr. Tomlinson, he's a humble serial killer. He's just trying to crucify some people. And two punk kids come on your property. Like, what are you supposed to do? You know?
Yeah. What other choice do you have but to kill them too when they come back? He even let them go. He shot the drone, and then that could have been the end of it. And then he's like, okay, I'll let them go on this instance, and then when the police come by, I'll already have taken the bodies down. I'm a valued member of the community. Also, so he vaguely found out in that Facebook group that Mr. Tomlinson had a wife before. I think that's what it was trying to say. I thought he was going to get in the Facebook group and they're like, hey, remember how those... Don't you love just hanging people's corpses like scarecrows on your lawn? I was trying to figure out what he was getting out of that Facebook group.
The way it would have went was like he went in the Facebook group and then like everyone in the village is just saying like, remember those two dumbass kids that came by that one day?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was so generous of Mr. Thomason to catch him and cook him so we could eat him. That was great. No, but I did enjoy that story. Especially, I liked the inclusion of it being something that they originally found on Google Maps, because that adds a little bit of an ominous, contemporary feel to it. So that was an enjoyable story. Again, I found a disturbing house on Google Maps. But as you know, guys, new episodes weekly. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.